onboarding overview. So I don't have a disclaimer today, just simply because we're not talking about payroll or anything like that, tax related. But our support here is to help you. We're not here to tell you how to do things. We're here to help you out when you need help on things. So onboarding typically does not have anything like tax compliance issues, so I don't need to bother with a disclaimer, but we're not tax professionals. We'll just go with that as far as that's concerned. So let's look at onboarding. I'm going to go ahead and switch over to my browser here, and you should be able to see this here in a moment. It should show self-service. And so here I am in self-service, and what I'm going to do is we're going to talk about how it's set up, and then I'm going to show you what it would look like on a new employee. We're not going to go into every single form and everything like that because we don't have enough time, but we'll talk about onboarding. So where people will do onboarding, of course, is in self-service, but it needs to be configured first. So as a system administrator, of course, you would go to the admin by clicking on the menu here and choosing one of these other options here for payroll, HR, recruiting, or scheduling, and then going over to your settings up here in the upper right-hand corner, which will land you on this page by default here. So when you're doing onboarding, of course, it's different for every company. You may have different forms than any other company. You may want people to do different things than anybody else. So what I'm going to show you is just kind of a generic one that I came up with. And of course, you could do your own thing here. So where do we configure it? It really depends on what's in your onboarding, but here's where onboarding is set up right here. I'm also going to show you a form and how that would work and gets added to onboarding, because that does need to exist if you're going to make a form part of your onboarding. So you'll see here, I have a few different onboarding lists configured here, and you can have as many lists as you would like. So if you needed one for every single job title or divisions or locations, different provinces or states or nations that you're in, that's no problem. We don't limit these in any way. So we make it so you can do whatever you like there. When I talk about this one here, I'm going to have a couple of forms. So let me just jump to forms just very quickly. I believe we have or have had forms training on here before. So this may be a repeat, or you may have received training from us in some other way on forms. But here's where they're located under general and forms. These could be created in a few different ways. One is you could import, perhaps you have a PDF that you want people to sign. Maybe there's a non-disclosure agreement or a handbook acknowledgement or something like that, where you've got a PDF that you've been using for all these years and you want to import that into the system. No problem. You hit import and you can add that in there. You could also click add, and you get a couple of choices with add. If I hit add, it'll come up with actually a blank template. And then you're just given literally a blank screen, and you can add your fields onto it. Or you could choose a data form, which already you basically define the fields that you want to be on there. You tell it, here's a list of fields, and we create a form that's just basically a grid of fields. So what does a form look like here? I'll go ahead and just pick one out. I've got this one down here I was just looking at a few minutes ago. So I imported in a PDF into here. You'll see the name. You can call it whatever you like. Let me just rename that one because I know it's a 2023 one. What is the type of form? I'm not sure why I have it down here as I-9. So maybe I want to call this, I don't know. I'm just going to call it a policy acknowledgement. But these are all types that would be set up in your code tables. So that's going to be under system configuration. If you do not see one here that you like, you can always choose one to start with and then later on fix it later. Like I probably don't want it under I-9. I'll maybe add one in the future that says tax forms or something like that. What is the workflow for this? So if somebody does this form independent of onboarding, what's the workflow of this? Maybe you assign it to somebody or they do it themselves. What's the workflow for that? What's the description of this? And you could have that in different languages here. Of course, is it active? You can't use it in a workflow or even independent of workflow unless it's active. Share it with the employee when they're done with the form and it's been approved and everything. Do you want it so it's visible to them in self-service? Locking after approval. So by default, we lock the form so it cannot be edited by anybody after it's approved. Kind of makes sense for a lot of forms that you don't want them to touch it after it's been approved, but maybe there's a form where it's okay if somebody goes in and changes the form afterwards. I don't know of a situation like that, but maybe there's one that you've got, in which case you could do that right there. This is the paper size. So you could choose that right there, whatever it happens to be. Who is initiating this? So you could set up groups of employees who have access to this form. Perhaps it's managers, perhaps it's people in a certain location, something like that. You would set up a employee group or groups for that, and then you would select one or more groups from here. Here's an example of the form. So I've got the W-4 background here, and then I have just different fields on here for different pieces of data. If you're familiar with the W-4, if you're from the United States, this is, their first and last name, their social, their address, etc. And you simply drag and drop them onto the form from these icons over here. If you had not done an import, this image would not be here, and you could drag and drop fields on here. You could add your own text labels and so forth if you would like to create a form. So after you're done creating your form and whatever you need to do with that, you would save a copy of it. And now your form is ready to add to onboarding. You may not use it on onboarding. Maybe you can use it for something else, but it would be ready for onboarding if you're going to do that. Now, the other thing you need to do for onboarding is you do need to create a workflow. So you can't have an onboarding without a workflow on there. So workflows are available under system configuration. And all the way at the bottom is workflows because it's alphabetical. And here you can see I have a whole bunch of them set up. Let me just show you my active ones. And here's the one I'm going to be using. It's just called employee onboarding. You could call it anything you like. You could have multiple onboarding ones that maybe follow different approval processes for, again, perhaps different groups of employees, like different states. Maybe you've got divisions and there's HR people for different divisions or anything like that. So you could call it whatever you like. The type would be employee onboarding. The module would just be self-service. That's the only place where it exists there. You'll see here the group, active employees. Of course, it could be any group of employees, just like the form can be assigned to any group of employees. You could do that there. I'll talk about this in a second there, the status of active. If you want a different confirmation check text than the default, you could do that. And then your different steps that are down here for approval. So the initiator is going to be the employee who's doing that particular step in the onboarding. It's probably going to be the new employee. It could be somebody else that maybe you have an approval on. If somebody else is doing a form for them, maybe that's something you would do for that. But that would be whoever that is the approver there. And of course, I believe we've talked about workflows in the past, but you could choose who is that approver. Maybe it's a specific employee. Maybe it's a certain manager or something like that. Maybe it's a position that's in charge of doing this, maybe like HR. You've got a position in there or something like that. They need to be the one who's approving that. All right, once you add an approval, these auto action days show up. These are not here when you first come in here. That's why I was going to cover them later. Once you have an approval in here, auto action allows you to approve or deny it automatically after a certain amount of days if the approver does not do anything. If you leave this blank, it never will auto approve or auto reject. It will sit in this person's inbox until they finish doing it. You can do an escalation though. You could say if it sits there for X number of days, I want to escalate it to somebody else. And, then it goes to that person if the first approver does not do anything on it. All right, so once you have the components of the onboarding set up, most importantly the workflow, but possibly forms, you're going to go ahead and set up onboarding right here. So I'm going to go into this onboarding list, which is the one I'm going to assign here in a moment, and show you what an onboarding list looks like. So this one, I've got 10 different items. You could call it whatever you like. Again, like I mentioned, maybe you've got this for different jobs, different divisions, locations, states, provinces, countries, whatever. You could call it whatever you like. So this might be the onboarding task list for Arizona, right? And these are the tasks you want somebody in Arizona to complete. So you could just call it onboarding task list for Arizona. Whatever you like to call it. Doesn't really matter as far as we don't care what you call it. You can call it anything you like. All right. A pre-hire one would be one that is used in recruiting. So if you're doing something with recruiting and you would like the pre-hire list to be, or pre-hire onboarding list to be available for them as pre-boarding, that's what this box would be for. So that's what that is right there. Now, how do you add these items? There's a button right here to add them. So you can add 1 or 100. We don't limit the number of items you would want to add here. Probably 100 be a little bit over the top, but if that's what it is, then and we're not judging you. It's just it's a lot of items for somebody to complete. So you can imagine that. But here you'll see here, I've got a whole bunch of different things here. Let me show you what a form would look like here. So I would have clicked add, and I could name it whatever I like. In my situation, I'm calling it Form I-9. What is the group that I want to put this under? Forms and paperwork. The type here is a form. This is a drop-down menu. So there's other things I'll show you in a moment when we go look at the others, but there's other things that could be here. So this is a form. What's the sequence? So in what order do you want it to show up in the list of different forms and stuff? This one, because I said it was 0, is actually going to be right at the top. But maybe there's other ones you want to put in the order each you like there. So how soon after this is assigned does this need to be completed? So if somebody starts today, how long do they have to complete it after I assign the onboarding list to them? Or if I assign this to, maybe it's a new list I need to assign to people because I have a bunch of new paperwork going out. How long do they have to do it? 14 days or something like that. You may put that down there. This is actual calendar days. It's not business days or anything like that. So if I assign this on Friday, in 2 days, it would say it was due on Sunday, even though realistically, maybe it's due on Monday or Tuesday in that situation. What is the form? And what is the workflow for this particular thing here? So the employee onboarding workflow is right there. All right. Other things we could do here. So those are forms. It's the same setup for all 3 of these forms. I don't need to show you that, but that's the setup right there. Let's look at another thing, which is a system task. So a system task is something within the system that they could do. As an example, I have one here that says go through new hire benefits enrollment. So it's under the group called benefits, and I can put it wherever I like. I just happen to put it under benefits. And I chose the type of system task, and the task is open enrollment. Now, in my situation here, I have it due in 1 day. Probably wouldn't have that for a new hire. They probably don't need to know, like, as they sit down on their first day of hire, what they want to do with their benefits. You might give them, 14 days or 30 days or something like that. So you could just type that in there like that. So that's a system task. A user task is something that somebody else is going to do for this employee. Now, there's actually a couple of ways you could do this. One is you could actually assign a form to somebody else to complete, but a user task is something that's not within the system here. Maybe they need to get a badge, right? And we don't have badge printing within our system here. So if I do a user task here, I'm literally typing out what I want this person to do. So I would put down maybe under forms and paperwork, issue badge. And then I would put down here, issue badge to the above new hire / rehire. All right. And I'll put this a little bit further down. They have a couple of days to do this. Let's do that there. And then who is actually doing it? So the employee here is a person who's already in the system. This is not the new employee. This is an existing person who does this. So maybe it's Dana here does this. So Dana would get this task that says issue a badge to the new employee once I assign this list. All right, I got another one here for giving out a laptop, visit Ken in IT. Here you'll see some other ones we have down here where they are videos or documents. So in order for these to work, those videos or documents need to be already configured in the system. So as an example, your visit, this one here, this is a document called expense report policies. That would be already configured. I should have covered that earlier. That's under our general as well. You'll see documents. So if they need to read the handbook or get a copy of the handbook, at least, you could go to your documents, upload a copy of that, and then link it into here. And the same thing with video. Perhaps you have a video. How do you do your timesheet? How do you, use the badge swipe machine, or, watch this training on sexual harassment prevention, whatever it might be, maybe a video that's out there, and that video could be added into the system as well. All right. Another thing I don't have on here is courses. So if you do have courses that are set up under your learning management right there, you can add a course. So you'll see in here, I could choose course, and then the course does need to exist. So I could say that he or she needs to take this ethics course, and I'll just call this ethics course. go ahead and put this under meeting and communication. And they have to take that within the first 5 days. So that again does need to be configured right there. All right. So once I have this listed here, all the different things I would like them to do, of course, I probably want to save this so I don't lose anything. And then I could go back in if I like and make edits if I want to do that. Now, if I do remove something from this list for whatever reason, maybe we no longer are watching this video on timesheets because it got replaced or something like that, it's not going to go back and remove that from somebody it's already been assigned to. So they would still need it would still show up as a list for them. If you did do that, you would have to go to that person and remove it manually. If I add something new here and somebody's already had this list assigned, it's not going to go and assign it to them either. So if I change it, it's not going to touch any existing assignments. But how do I assign it? Well, there's a couple of ways to do that. First off, in the onboarding list, there's a button right here that says assign. And here I could choose a group or I could choose employees to assign it to. So I could say, I want everybody in car audio to take this or do this onboarding list. And anybody who's in that group would have this list assigned to them. Or I could select one or more employees and say, okay, these people need to do that right here. So I could search by last name, first name, employee number, title, and assign that. This is typically what you would do if you were, let's say this was a new list that you were going to assign to everybody or to certain people. Maybe there's a new policy and you've got your onboarding list of read the policy, sign the acknowledgement. That might be an example of that. You would assign it. Maybe there's a group for all employees and you assign that to everybody. Now, for a new hire, what happens is when you're going through the new hire process, the very last screen of new hire is onboarding. So you go through it, you look at their demographics, their position, and then you get to onboarding. And when you get there, it's blank like this. Now, this is not in the new hire process, but it looks exactly the same as this, in that you'll see some buttons up here to add either a list or a task. So I could choose list and choose that onboarding list that I just created, which I believe was called onboarding task list. And when I hit save, boom, all those things get added to this employee. Now, some of them are for other employees like Dana, Chris, and Desiree have tasks, but these have all been assigned. And I can assign multiple lists to employees as well. So perhaps there's a standard list for everybody, and then there's one that's specific to a certain location. You could do that. So I could go out there and say, okay, I did the onboarding list, but I also need to do this webinar onboarding list or whatever it is. And it's going to add those other things to this person's list. So I don't know what it added there, but it added something else in here. Maybe you look over this list and you say, you know what? I don't need him to order a laptop. I don't need Desiree to talk about expense reports. This person's never going to do expense reports. So I can just go in here and I can delete this, or I could edit it. So if I did want to change the due date of something or change the description, I could do that. I could delete it. If I edit it, I could hit save there to make that change. I can also add individual tasks on here as well. So this is more like I'm going to go through and do a one-off situation for this person. Maybe there's a certain form I would like them to do. Choose that form, pick it out from the list here, and key fob, whatever this is. So I can say fill out key fob form. All right, I'll just put this down on the list there. Number 15 there. I need this person to do it by the end of the month. I could type in the date. And here's the workflow. I only have one configured, but if I had multiple, I could do that. Now, if I want somebody else to do it, that's where it says assign to fill. So somebody else could do this key fob form for Jerry. All right, so now he's got that form. There it is right there. All right, so you can see what that looks like. Now on this screen, since I've just assigned it, nothing is here under notified and all the status is still open because I just assigned it to them. Now it's possible that one of these people or the new employee happened to be in self-service and they just started working on it because they saw these new tasks out there before I even notified them. That's fine. They can do that. I'm not going to, sweat on it if they do that. But if I want to notify them, I can hit this button right here. And that sends a notification out to everybody who needs to do something on this onboarding. So Jerry Sanderson would get an email, a notification, maybe a text saying he's got these different things to perform. Dana, Chris, Chris twice, and Desiree would also get one. So Dana would get one with one task, Chris would get one with two tasks, and Desiree would get one with one task. But they would all get notifications. So what does that look like from the employee perspective? So let me go ahead and switch over to a different browser where I'm logged in already as Jerry. And it looks like this. And I just realized I do not have the onboarding widget turned on in my self-service. So I'm going to switch back just very quickly to show you where that onboarding widget is configured in case you would like to use that. I thought I had it turned on, but I don't. So that is actually, I'm going to go back over to my settings. And you'll see here under system configuration, I have ESS widgets and onboarding is not turned on. So you may or may not want to use this one. I'll show you what it looks like. I thought I already had it on. I was going to talk about it, but I didn't. So now let me refresh here and share this browser. Here we go. You should be able to see this browser here. I'm logged into the system now as Jerry. So this is that new employee. Here is the onboarding widget, which shows all the different tasks and their current status that need to be done right here. So you'll see here, fill out this form. These right here, they've been assigned to them. So all these different tasks are there. Now, it's not everything, of course, because some of them went to other people. So they don't see those things that other people are working on for them. So you may remember I had like 13 or 14 different items there. Here it's only showing 11 because he's only responsible for 11 of them. Now, I also see this up here. This little bell icon will tell me I've got 11 tasks to perform. If I was in my mobile app, I would see that I had 11 tasks to perform. And you'll see over here on the left, I've got 11 tasks to perform. So I've got a lot of different things I need to do here. Now, you may remember that sequence that Form I-9 was number 0. So that's why it's up at the top here. Visit Ken in IT was number 1, 2, et cetera, all the way down to the fill out the form thing I just added. I think it made it as number 15. So it's way down here at the bottom. The order that the person does it, they could actually do it in whatever order they want. Just the order here is determined by that sequence. So if this person wanted to start off going down and doing this ethics course, that's okay. They could do that. They could click on this and go ahead and do that particular course if they would like to do that. Or visit Lisa in accounting and read the manual right there. They could go ahead and do that. It doesn't matter. We don't force them to go like through the list consecutively if they need to skip around. So here's an example of a form. The I-9 form, if you're from the US, you may be familiar with this form. So I have this filled out. Some of this stuff is already filled out based off of the information in his profile. I don't have everything done in his profile, so I'll go ahead and fill in some of the things like that. Now, his date of birth, I don't believe I have that on his profile, so that's why it's blank here. Same with things social. I know I didn't put that in, but I can go ahead and do this. Let's just say 5/15/1990 is his birthday there, and I'll come up with a social security number. There's his email address. He's going to attest to this, and he's going to sign this form and put in today's date here. Now, you may or may not have seen our I-9 when we initiated or we started doing E-Verify a year or two ago. But the way the I-9 works is you would stop basically at this point. The employee would not have access to update any of these other fields. That's all done by HR. So you'll see here, as an example, it does tell me, stop, the employer completes the next page. I can't click on these fields. That's a form setting. We would go into more depth on that on our form training, but I'm not able to do this. So I would just go down to the bottom here as the employee and submit this. All right. And then it goes on to the next thing, which was to visit Ken in IT to do this. And here's the handbook as an example. Whatever it happens to be, I've got different things on here. If it's a video, I click a button to watch the video and it looks like it would go to YouTube. and show that. I can mark it as completed once I've done that. If there's something where I need him to update his data, and I thought, well, the only thing I have here is new hire enrollment, but if I did have his address or demographics, those might be other ones, but here you see new hire enrollment. I don't have an enrollment configured. I forgot to do that for this year, but I would have an open enrollment to complete right here. So the various tasks. Now, as he's completing them, of course, I completed that form and went from 11 to 10. And showing that in progress here because somebody needs to approve it. So it's not completed all the way, it's actually in progress. But once it is approved, it'll fall off of this list. Once all of these things on the list have been completed, this whole widget goes away to let the employee know that everything is done for their onboarding. Okay. So I think there's been a few Q&A questions here. Hopefully they've all been answered. I think Connor and or Patrick have been in there doing this. So hoping you're getting the answers here. I didn't want to go through everything on here, but let me just see here. He's answered all these questions on here. So I did want to point out a couple of things before the end of our training today. So first off, let me switch back to my administrative browser. I do want to point out, of course, you've got your Q&A right here where you folks have been asking questions, and that's great. But if you do have any further questions, you can always hit this button right here for support in case you didn't know this one. And you'll see we've got our contact information down here at the bottom. You can click on this, it'll launch email. If you've got your phone or whatever hooked up. I know some computers you can actually dial out by clicking on this. So that would work there. You could also submit a ticket if you would like by clicking on this and submitting a request if you have any questions on that. And of course, if you go to a screen, let's say like onboarding, this is going to give you help on onboarding. So great way to learn about this information. This is kept up to date as we go through and do our updates. So speaking of updates, if you have not already signed up for it, on Friday, we are doing our webinar for our latest release that's coming out. There are a bunch of new things. There are over 30 new items that have been added for this release. I'm not going to give any sneak peeks because I want people to attend that one there, but there are a lot of great new features that have been added. If you have ideas for the system, I always bring this up. Please feel free to click the magic wand here with your new idea and let us know about that. We take these seriously and we do add features based off of your requests and new ideas through here. Finally, I did want to bring up our slide, talk about our next sessions out here. So let me bring this up one last time here. And it should be showing, hopefully, my PowerPoint. So our next session is on the 7th of February. We're going to talk one more time about ACA reporting. So if you missed our first one, we're going to revisit that, or maybe there's some additional questions that you didn't get answered, or you would like to ask or something like that. We're going to be talking about it then. Oh, forms overview. I knew we were going to talk about it. I should have done this one before the onboarding, but forms overview. We'll go into more depth on the forms, so you'll be able to get any questions on that, hopefully answered. Then we're going to jump over to some payroll topics, talking about GL account mapping and deductions overview. So looking forward to seeing you all in those future classes. Again, if you have questions, please feel free to reach out to support. And if you did not get your question answered today, we will reach out to you to make sure they all get answered. So thank you again for joining us, and I hope you all have a nice day.